In this video, we're going to be solving quadratics, however they're going to be disguised as word problems. So you have two main types of problems. You have right triangles, which is any triangle that has a right angle, and you have everything else. So for the right triangles, you'll see this Pythagorean theorem or Pythagorean formula that I have on the screen. Again, this only works for right triangles. What matters is that the legs are A and B, and then the hypotenuse is C. So your formula is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now for anything else that doesn't have to do with a triangle, I would use the quadratic formula. You could use complete the square, but if you remember, it gets nasty pretty quickly. You're going to do your 3 steps. Step 1, find the discriminant. Step 2, plug it in. And then step 3, simplify. For this whole section, I want decimals because they're word problems, and decimals in the sense of the world, context matters. So for these problems, I'm not going to completely walk you through solving. I'm just going to get it set up and then give you the answer. So example 1, you have a regular classroom auditorium that holds 884 students. The number of seats in each row exceeds the number of rows by 8. Find the number of seats in each row. So the first thing I always do is draw a picture. So that means I have some number of rows, and the number of seats is 8 more than that. So I'm going to let x equal the number of rows, which means that x plus 8 is going to be the number of seats in each row. Now, anytime I'm trying to find how many individual seats, I multiply the number of seats in the row times the row. So length times width equals 884, which is going to give me my length is x, and my width is x plus 8. So I have x times x plus 8. I'm going to multiply that thing out. And now from here, I'm going to slide everything over and solve using the quadratic formula. I did not actually solve it. I just went through and gave you the answer. So once you do the quadratic formula, you find the discriminant and all that, you're going to get out 26 and negative 34. Because I cannot have negative seats in the row, I'm going to throw out negative 34, which means x, the number of rows, is 26. However, if you look back, the question asked me, well, find the number of seats. And it said that the number of seats is 8 more than the rows, so my final answer will be 34. My second example has to do with a right triangle. So I'm not going to use the quadratic formula. I'm going to use that Pythagorean theorem. So it says 2 legs of a right triangle are the same length. The hypotenuse is 4 meters long. Find the length of the length. Express your answer in a simplified radical or a decimal rounded to 4 places. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a picture. I draw a picture of my right triangle. And then because the legs are the same length, A equals B. So where I have my Pythagorean theorem, I'm going to replace B with A squared. Because A and B are the same thing, because the legs are the same length, I'm going to fill in A squared plus A squared equals C squared. Now, because the hypotenuse, C equals 4, then I'm going to go in and fill in C equals 4. So A squared plus B squared equals 4 squared, which is going to give me, combine up the left, simplify the right, 2a squared equals 16. I'm going to go through and solve this and get a equals plus or minus the square root of 8. Simplify the radical, or you can go ahead and put it into a decimal. And again, because this is length, if I said 2 square root of 2 meters, that doesn't really make sense. So I actually prefer the decimals only for this section. Now again, because I am doing length, I can't have negative meters, so my final answer is A equals 2.8284. Final example says an arrow is shot vertically upward from a platform 8 feet high at a rate of 169 feet per second. When will the arrow hit the ground? So I gave you the formula. Hawks will give you the formula, and then round to the nearest tenth. So I'm going to just have one decimal place. First thing I always want to do is draw a picture. I have a guy. He's shooting an arrow straight up in the air. It's going to land at some place. Now, to define some of these terms, V naught is what this thing is called. V naught, that means the initial velocity, and in my case, it's 169. H naught, which is the initial height, is 8 feet because I'm standing on a platform. Now, I want to know when will the arrow hit the ground. Well, the arrow is going to hit the ground when H, the height, is 0. So now I'm going to plug all of those things into the formula and get H equals, or 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 169t plus 8. And that is just by filling in the V naught, the H naught, and the H equals 0. That is filling in all of these things into this formula. That's how I get this final formula out. So from there, you're going to go through and find your A, B, and C, do your quadratic formula like normal, and then this is what you get out. Now, because this is, I'm trying to find a time, I'm looking at how long until it hits. I don't really want the radical simplified because that doesn't make sense to me. So go ahead and get the decimal approximate. This one on the left is when you do 169 plus the square root. This one on the right is when you do 169 minus the square root. Again, because t is time, if I said negative 0.05 seconds, that doesn't make sense. So I'm going to throw out that answer, and my final answer will be 10.6 seconds. So I shoot my arrow up in the air. After 10 and a little bit more, 10.5 seconds, the arrow is going to hit the ground.